All right, let's get right into it. Back in January 2023, Prince Harry dropped what can only be described as a literary bombshell. His memoir, Spare, wasn't just another royal book, it was a global phenomenon. He was promising to finally pull back the curtain on the world's most famous family. And boy, did he deliver.
So, just how big was this? Well, on day one, just its first day, it sold 1.4 million copies across the UK, US, and Canada. That's not just big, that's record-breaking. Guinness World Records actually confirmed it. It's the fastest-selling nonfiction book of all time. So what on earth was in this book that had the entire world scrambling to get a copy?
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at why it became such a massive seller. Then we'll dive into the core theme, the heir versus the spare. We'll cover the most explosive accusations, look at the whole debate over its accuracy, and finally, a year later, what's the lasting impact? What's the verdict?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Why did this book become this huge cultural moment? What really goes right to the heart of what Harry himself said he wanted to do.
You know, right from the get-go, Harry sets out his mission statement. He's saying, forget everything you think you know from the tabloids. This is my story, in my words. It was his big play to reclaim his own narrative, to tell us about the highs, the lows, and everything in between, trying to show we've all got more in common than we think.
And this quote right here, it just nails the central theme of the whole book, this idea of a gilded cage. From the outside, it looks like a fairy tale, right? But from Harry's perspective, it's a life of intense psychological pressure. It really makes you think, what's the actual human cost of being born into a monarchy in this day and age? And at the absolute center of that psychological story is this one single conflict that has pretty much defined Harry's entire life, the whole dynamic of the heir and the spare. So, the heir and the spare, it's not just a cute nickname. It comes from this centuries-old system called primogeniture. Basically, the firstborn, in this case, William, gets everything. The title, the destiny, the whole shebang. The secondborn, Harry, is just the backup plan. And Harry argues this wasn't just some subtle thing in the background, it was the foundation of his entire identity. And I mean, listen to how brutally he puts it himself. This is his own perspective. He wasn't just the support, he was plan B. He felt like he was brought into the world just in case something happened to his older brother. A spare part, maybe even a kidney. Wow, that framing is really the engine that drives this entire story.
And this quote just captures that tragic conflict perfectly. How can someone be both your beloved brother and your arch nemesis? Well, according to Harry, that's what happens when your roles are set in stone from birth. He frames their entire relationship, from childhood fights to major adult blow-ups, through this lens of rivalry.
Okay, so with that whole dynamic as the backdrop, we get to the really explosive stuff. Harry basically describes his life as fighting a war on two fronts, one against the media and another, much more painful one, inside his own family. First, his lifelong battle with the press. He accuses them of everything from criminal acts like phone hacking to just relentless, intolerable harassment. He spends a huge amount of time talking about the racism he says Meghan faced and how the palace didn't protect her. And he lays the ultimate blame for his mother's tragic death right at their feet. But honestly, the one revelation that made jaws drop everywhere was about the war happening behind palace walls. Harry claims that during a heated argument about Meghan, William grabbed him, ripped his necklace, and knocked him to the floor. He says he landed on a dog bowl which broke and left him with visible cuts and scrapes on his back.
And the accusations just kept coming. He claims his stepmother, Camilla, leaked stories to the press to rehab her own public image. He gives his side of that famous bridesmaid dress fight, saying it was Meghan who was left sobbing on the floor. He even alleges that his own father was worried Meghan's star power might overshadow him, and that it was actually William and Kate who encouraged him to wear that awful Nazi costume years ago.
So, as you can imagine, all these bombshells led to an immediate and pretty fierce backlash, which raised some serious questions about the book's accuracy and really about memory itself.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because Harry kind of anticipates this criticism in the book. He basically says his personal memory, how an event made him feel, has its own kind of truth, even if it's different from what he calls so-called objective facts. He's essentially arguing for his subjective, emotional truth.
Well, his critics were ready, and they pounced on those objective facts. They pointed out a bunch of inconsistencies. For instance, Harry vividly remembers being at Eton when he heard the Queen Mother died, but news reports from that time have him on a ski trip. Or he claims Camilla suggested he become Governor General of Bermuda, which is a title that doesn't actually exist, and these kinds of things just added fuel to the fire for people questioning the book's reliability.
Which brings us to today. After all the noise, the record-breaking sales, and the endless debates, a year later, what's the lasting impact of Spare? What's the final verdict?
Well, if you look at the numbers, they tell a pretty stark story, at least in the UK. According to YouGov polls, Harry's popularity took a massive hit. Before the book, about half the country had a favorable view of him. Right after it was released, that number was basically cut in half, dropping down to just 25%.
So, even though it sold millions of copies, it seems to have backfired in the court of public opinion. For a lot of people, it just reinforced this image of the Sussexes as complaining from a place of huge privilege. And, ironically, the people who benefited most were William and Kate. Their approval ratings actually went up.
But maybe the most poignant takeaway, the thing that really captures the human cost of all this, is this heartbreaking plea from their dad, King Charles. Harry writes that after Prince Philip's funeral, Charles stood between his two feuding sons and just begged them, "Please, boys, don't make my final years a misery." It just lays bare how deep the cracks in this family really are.
And that leaves us with this one big, final question. In writing Spare, Harry wanted to break free and tell his own truth. But in doing so, did he actually reclaim his life? Or did he just end up trading one gilded cage for another? A new cage built out of media deals, public scrutiny, and a family feud that's now been permanently written into history. That's a question we'll all be debating for a long time to come.